Spare, Chelsy. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor, and now we continue with further analysis in respect of Prince Harry. About Chelsea. No, not the district in London or the football club that at the moment are struggling somewhat, and Graham Potter must be wondering why on earth he took up the reins there. Instead, we're going to be touching upon somebody who came into Harry's life. However, first of all, before we get on to that, we have Harry reminiscing still about working on the farm in Australia. And he explains that the first person that tried to sneak on to the farm took place in December 2003. And then a couple more members of the press turned up also, and he decided that he wanted to leave. He explained that he owed a lot to the Hills and he didn't want to ruin their lives by having lots of press wandering around, and that he didn't want them to lose the one resource that he describes more precious than water: privacy. He thanked them for 9 of the best weeks of his life, and then flew home. And he decided that he would go clubbing instead. So he went to a club, and then again the next night, and the next night afterwards, and he was rather pleased because the press thought that he was in Australia. And he then explained that he met some girl who was a page 3 girl, and then in comes Harry's wife's footnote. That was the accepted misogynistic objectifying term for young topless women featured each day on page 3 of Rupert Murdoch's The Sun. There's no way that Harry at that time thought, when he was engaging with the page 3 girl, oh, goodness, I better not call her that. That's the accepted misogynistic way of objectifying a young topless woman. He probably thought, boobs, titties. He would not have addressed it in that way. And we have another revision of history taking place in that respect, and of course affected by whom? But Harry's wife. He talks about the fact that he then left and walked away from the press, and then about the fact that there was a report about him supposedly kissing a page 3 girl, and then he describes the snobbery, the classism was nauseating, the out-of-order priorities were baffling. Balls. Again, this is a revisionist lacquer that has been applied by Harry's wife. Next, he's on his way to Lesotho, and he decided that he was going to ask George to go with him. He then explains that in Lesotho it was a beautiful place, and that he was there to do good works. So him and George signed up to help at charities and schools, and the people there were lovely people. And then he explained that they built schools, they repaired schools, which again goes to this point that it does appear that Harry is happy when he's rolled his sleeves up and he's getting in amongst the dirt. He explained that he loved children and he wanted to help out. And he had an interview, and then he was being asked again about his mother. And of course, once again, this has been brought up, and it coincides with the release of the butler's memoir. And he explained that it was now 7 years after being hounded into hiding that his mother was still being hounded and libelled. Notice that after 7 years still, he doesn't refer to her of his mother as being dead, but that she was still in hiding. And accordingly, he then has the scandal of the page 3 girl being referenced again, and that the reporter was trying to make out that he was needing to go to rehab clinic and that he was some kind of addict, etc. And he then says that he looked around him whilst he was being interviewed by this member of the press, and he sees poverty and disease and orphans, and therefore he felt ashamed of these topics that were being discussed, sitting above all this misery and talking about page 3 girls. So his way of dealing with all of that was to go off and drink a load of beer with George and then smoked an entire shopping bag of weed. He says he doesn't recommend it. Next, in March 2004, he then flies off to Cape Town and was staying at the home of the Consul General. Him and George went there. But it wasn't completely true that he didn't know everybody there, because there was someone from there who he'd met some years earlier, a girl from South Africa at the Berkshire Polo Club. It was Chelsy, and he decided to give her a call. So he did, and she answered, and he reminded her of who she was, and he said, "Why don't you come over?" But she sounded a little bit unsure, so he handed the phone over to Marco, who said, "It is Prince Harry, and it's an invitation that's sincere, and why not come over? It's a low key." So she asked if she could bring her girlfriend and her brother, and that was agreed. And there she was. She turned up. And she didn't seem particularly concerned with his appearances, with propriety or royalty. And, unlike so many girls I met, Harry writes, she wasn't visibly fitting herself for a crown the moment she shook my hand. She seemed immune to that common affliction sometimes called throne syndrome. It was similar to the effect that actors and musicians have on people, except with actors and musicians, the root cause is talent. I had no talent, so I'd been told again and again, and thus all the reactions to me had nothing to do with me. They were down to my family, my title, and consequently they always embarrassed me, because they were so unearned. Well, those are his recollections, but if you were so embarrassed by your title, Harry, why haven't you got rid of it? Again, that shows the hypocrisy, and it might be that he has wanted to get rid of it, but clearly Harry's wife has caused him not to accept that state of affairs, because of course, as he was recently asked why not get rid of the title, he said, what difference would that make? In actual fact, he believes that the title should be kept. But again, we see that discrepancy that occurs whereby he talks about the fact that he was ashamed of the fact that he got a title and it was embarrassing. The obvious thing to do then would be to get rid of it. And he could have done that when he sought out this supposed privacy and being a private citizen. But we all know that his wife will never let that happen because she's nothing without the titles. He then goes on to explain that Chelsy probably didn't know much about the tragic events of August 1997. Yes, his mother gets mentioned again, but to Chelsy's credit, it never came up. So they talked about Africa and the fact that she was born and raised in Zimbabwe. And then he explained that he was going to go into the army and that he was heading off to Botswana, and he contemplated that she should come with him. But she said she had got other plans, but she cancelled them because she'd love to come with him. He then explains that he spent 3 days walking, laughing, drinking, mingling with the animals, and that he and Chelsy had their first kiss under the stars. Apparently, George fell head over heels in love with Chelsy's girlfriend. There were sad goodbyes all around when it came time for Chelsy and her girlfriend to go home. Then Harry said that he went to a camp in a Land Cruiser and found men and women drinking, dancing, all wearing bizarre animal masks made from cardboard and pipe cleaners. And so he then joined in all of this mayhem. And he wanted to see how some filmmaking was going on. And he was told that he could come along and do some heavy work. So he thought, right, okay, he would do so. And he talks about two individuals called TJ and Mike, who were Africans. She was from Cape Town, he was from Nairobi. And then he gives us a bit of history about their lives and that they were devoted to wildlife. And he saw that they basically were very involved with animals, and they talked about how the two of them had met up together and a pair of them got on very well. And apparently he explains all about the grandfather's books, and Mike had all TJ's other favourites arranged in the same order as on her own shelves, and there was synchronicity. And apparently this was viewed as a sign, and she never went back to her apartment except to pack her stuff, and that she and Mike had been together ever since. Now, we don't know what the nature of that relationship was. and there's obviously some mirroring going on there, but it's interesting how Harry has been duped by this to believe, there's such thing as this synchronicity, when actually it's mirroring. And then he felt that there was an overwhelming need to see Chelsea again, and he decided that he was going to drive to go and see her in Cape Town. So he got in a car and drove, and then he arrived at Chelsea's front door, barefoot, scruffy, crowned with a filthy beanie, a huge smile creasing his dirty face. He then explains that the two of them learned an important lesson, and this will really open your minds up here with this earth-shaking revelation. Africa was Africa, but Britain was always Britain. Thanks for that, Harry. He says they got back to Heathrow and they were papped, and therefore there was the fact that the appearance of the paparazzi was being treated like a chronic illness, and he wondered about whether he would see Chelsea again. This was because he faced the entrance examinations for the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, and that it turned out that he'd actually passed the examinations with flying colours, and he was rather pleased about all of that. And he then explains that his trouble about concentration with regard to the trauma of his mother, that didn't count against him with the British Army. Apparently, the army was looking for people like him. And therefore, he was able to type loose ends and spend time with Chelsea if she'd have him, and she would. So he went back to Cape Town to meet her parents, and he did, and he liked them instantly. And he talks about what her parents were like. And thus, clearly he gets along with Chelsea, and he speaks about her in glowing terms. We now learn more about somebody's marriage in the next video. Join me there.